Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for sticking around and thanks for joining for the last session of today, where we'll be focusing on the market of Indonesia. Lastly, I'd just like to thank our sponsors again for making this all possible. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our esteemed panelists today. We've got a great lineup for you, and hopefully we'll get some good insights into the market and kind of the developments happening and why it's viewed as such a promising market. So please take to the stage and look forward to the discussion.
Jeffrey, that's my chair.
Oh, you're here.
No, it's gone.
No, I'm just following the picture.
Should we start? Good evening, everyone. My name is Siddharth. I'm a telecoms-focused strategy consultant with 7 years of experience advising telecom operators and investors across Asia Pacific. I've worked extensively in Indonesia, working with mobile operators, advising them on commercial and network strategy. I'm based out of Singapore, working with Roland Berger, which is a European strategy consultancy. We have 51 offices across the world, and we have expertise across different business functions and industries, telecom being one of the focus areas. So we have quite a diverse panel here with us today. I'll pass on the mic to them one by one to introduce themselves. We have Mayank from BDX.
Hey, thanks, Ed. I support BDX. We are a data center platform across Asia. Hi, how are you? A data center platform across Asia. Currently, we have running facilities in China, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Indonesia. And fingers crossed, you should be hearing 4 more countries during the next year.
Thanks, Mayank. We have Michael from Motelendo.
Hi, so my name is Michael McPhail. I'm the CTO for Mora Telematica Indonesia. Probably the second largest ISP or fixed broadband provider in Indonesia, offering all different types of services. Now we've got subsea cables, terrestrial cables, offering backbone services, international transit, IPLC type connections. But then we actually move into the retail space also, and also in the wholesale space, and we also have some DCs across our network too. So, and I've actually been in the country for more than 14 years. Yeah, so I've been in Indonesia for a while.
Right. We have Bala from OneWeb.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's thinning out a little bit, and we are the last panel, and I was going to be the last panelist, but now I'm in the middle. So last panel, and it's the graveyard session of the day, and you guys are all tired. So we have to keep you excited. So I brought some presents. Actually prizes. I have a couple of simple questions to ask. Whoever gets it right gets a prize. Name is Bala. I'm with OneWeb, and OneWeb is developing a global network of 650 low Earth orbiting communication satellites, supported by 40-something gateways on the ground, interconnected by fiber. So when we are fully commercially ready, end of next year, we will have a formidable space and ground network to provide low latency, high bandwidth connectivity to anywhere in the world. As with all other satellite operators, we're trying to provide connectivity to everyone who's currently not connected, some way or the other. And there are some nuances with low latency and high bandwidth, which we'll talk about later. Thank you.
Right. We have Jeffrey from Space DC.
Hi. After Elon Musk of the East, so to speak, I'm Space DC. We are doing, not SPS, BDX. We have a small footprint right now in Asia. We've done 2 projects, one in Indonesia, one currently in Philippines. We do have a broader pan-Asia view as well, but we are working on it as we speak. I represent the organization handling the strategic partnership relationship, which includes the strategic partnership with the customers, partner ecosystem, and the media, which is part of the marketing. All right, I'm very honored and happy to be on this panel with the distinguished guests. And yes, we are in between you and the networking drink session, so we expect no question at the end of it, other than the question that Bala will raise with prices. So over to Budi, our good friend here from Tele.
Yeah, Pak Budi from Telin.
I am Budi Purwa, CEO of Telin. Telin is international arm of Telecom Indonesia Group. We are providing quite wide range of the international services, starting with voice messaging, international connectivity, data center, security, and other things. And we are quite aggressive in terms of the investment and the subsea cable. I think we have been investing about 11 international subsea cable, including maybe the recent development like CMU6, Bifrost cable, and we have we own and have capacity in other 26 international submarine cable system. And we also operating international data center, like here in Singapore, we have our own operation, and also in Hong Kong, and also Timor-Leste, Timor. Yeah, thanks.
Right, thank you everyone. So the topic we have in front of us today is how is Indonesia's digital infrastructure keeping up with the explosive economic growth? As you would all know, Indonesia is one of the fastest growing major economies in the world right now. And even going forward, strong investment from government on the infrastructure, supportive policy for private investment, and robust domestic consumption will continue driving economic growth in the near future. And along with this economic growth, there is also skyrocketing demand for connectivity, which is both affordable and reliable across both urban and rural Indonesia. So telecom operators, digital infrastructure providers in the country need to find a way to keep up with this demand while future-proofing their investments against technological advances. So with that, let's dive into the first question with Pak Budi. Pak Budi, the government has a digital roadmap over the years 2021 to 2024 to support the development of digital infrastructure. So where are we on this journey?
Yeah, thanks. If you look at the Indonesia Digital Roadmap 2021 to 2024, there are 4 key strategic areas that the government is focusing. First one is digital infrastructure. Second is digital government, and then the third, digital economy, and the fourth one is digital society. Of course, digital infrastructure will play a key role to enable the other key strategic sectors that the government being focusing. One of the objectives that is stated related to digital infrastructure in that roadmap is to have internet user penetration 82.3% by 2024. Today we have around 74% internet user penetration. It means that there is 8% gap for that. So I think to catch up with this number as the objective stated in that roadmap, I think having equitable infrastructure, digital infrastructure is key. Especially we see that still a big gap for the eastern part of Indonesia comparing to the western part of Indonesia. If we want to overcome this challenge, I think we need to look at the 4 pillars in terms of the digital infrastructure. First one is on the access. Second is on the backhaul and the backbone. The third one is on the data center. And then the fourth one is international connectivity. So access is quite related there on with the backhaul and backbone, and data center also quite related with the international connectivity. Now, if you look at on the access, backhaul and backbone, I think a fixed broadband and mobile is the primary access infrastructure. for this. However, for the fixed broadband, mostly available in the big cities. Today we have around 11.1 million fixed broadband, but mostly available in big cities. So mobile is become the key to catch up with that internet user penetration. Today we have about 5% gap in terms of the coverage today. Of course, the government have some initiative to use the USO fund to develop in the certain area, but I think it's more effective if the mobile operator also expanding to this region. But again, the challenge is if they want to expand their coverage in this region, the challenge is always on the availability and affordability of the backhaul toward this location. Because this location, there is no fiber and everything, and rely on the satellites is expensive. Thanks God, recently some of the low Earth orbit satellites available already, so it can be a faster solution and more affordable with lower latency, as Bala mentioned. And as Telkom Group now, we are working with Starlink to provide a backhauling for the expansion of Telkomsel BTS, especially in this underserved region. So hopefully with that, it will accelerate the penetration on the internet from the mobile. The second infrastructure is more on the data center and international connectivity. I think just like the previous session, Indonesia has become a hype market for the data center expansion in this region, right? With the today, I think 77% of the business already adopting cloud solution-based IT with the cloud spending. I think the last 3 years growth 25% CAGR. Then it's make rational for all the hyperscalers also expanding and developing their data center in Indonesia, right? And the other a pure play data center also now expanding in Indonesia, even like the real estate company also building data center. But unfortunately, most of this development only in the Jakarta region. It is understandable because of the business still concentrated in Jakarta, and the other factor is the international connectivity mostly also landing in Jakarta, right? Of course, besides Jakarta, Batam now also become hype, but mostly is to cater the excess demand from Singapore, right? And Batam also have the international connectivity like Jakarta. Today, for the international connectivity we have about 17 international subsea cable. 16 out of 17 actually covering Jakarta and Batam, and going to the same road to Malacca Strait, and mostly to Singapore. So it become a big concern also from us, just like the previous session. So it become a single point of failure. That's the first concern from us. So we need to have a diversity for this road, right? 16 out of 17 using this road. So the second concern is the latency, especially for the eastern part of Indonesia. Today with that infrastructure, all the traffic from the eastern part of Indonesia, we need to bring it to Jakarta, and then if content available there, then it's going to stay there. Otherwise, we need to bring it to Singapore using this infrastructure. Indonesia is a wide country. From Jakarta, the latency from Jakarta to the eastern part of Indonesia could be around 40 to 65 milliseconds. If you take a flight from Jakarta to Jayapura, it takes about 5 hours flight, right? So it's quite challenging. So it's not fair for them. So this is also the reason why for Telin now recently and Telkom Group, we developed the Eastern Gateway for Indonesia beside Batam. So we choose Manado. Today, one cable system already landing in Manado, our CUS cable. The next cable, Bifrost cable, also will be landing in Manado. And then we're still initiating 2 or 3 cable that will be landing in Manado, connecting Manado to Asian countries, Hong Kong, Japan, and of course US. So with this development, we are expecting that later on maybe the data center business also will be expanded to that region that help, at the end, help the internet access, and hopefully also more carriers, hyperscalers also joining us to develop the infrastructure to this region. I think that's that I can share. That's it.
All right. Thanks, Pabudi. You rightly mentioned there's a lot of digital divide across regions within Indonesia. So let's address that one by one. We'll start with how the mobile and the fixed line industry is addressing that gap. What are the challenges that they're facing? So we'll start with Michael.
Okay, thank you. I mean, if you take the mobile space in Indonesia, sorry, prior to me joining Moratel, I used to work in Axis and also Excel, so I've been in the mobile space in Indonesia for a while also. Mobile in Indonesia is characterised by too many players and lack of spectrum. And that's really been a challenge for the industry for a long time. And as a result, you know, the carriers or the MNOs have been unable to really deliver high quality services. And I think as a country, expected mobile broadband to be the key and be able to reach, you know, and provide data services to customers. But I think that's changing now. You know, if you look at what's happening in the market, there's consolidation. So Axis Excel, you've seen Indosat, Ooredoo together with Hutchinson. So you see that consolidation. That really opens up possibilities for the operators to deliver lower cost services, because with lack of spectrum, it becomes extremely capex intensive. In areas, for example, in Jakarta, where you've got a population of 16 million people, it's very, very difficult to serve high quality services in these areas. So I think that with the change in the consolidation of the market, that has to happen anyway. In addition to that, you know, what the government's doing, they're opening up the 700 meg spectrum. 2.6 is going to be available next year as well. They're doing auctions for 3.5 next year and looking at millimeter wave at 26 gig for 5G services. And I think we're seeing also the mobile operators, you know, shutting down legacy systems, for example, especially 3G at the moment, moving to LTE or 4G services, and that's going to help deliver, you know, higher quality services for customers. It doesn't solve the problem of reach. It doesn't solve the problem in East Indonesia, and Pat Budi mentioned that we've got these USO projects running now to try and give coverage in areas where really it's not commercially viable to be able to deploy mobile services. But I'd say maybe about 6 years ago, the country went through a change and transformation where it was relying on mobile broadband to provide broadband services, and then a switch across into fixed line infrastructure. And so you've seen a lot of development now. Unfortunately, the penetration rate is still very low in Indonesia. It's only 14%. Fixed broadband penetration. There's 60 million households in Indonesia. About 50% of those, or 30 million households, can only really be penetrated through fixed broadband at the moment. The other 30%, or for 50%, 30 million households require mobile services or satellite service to be able to reach the various customers. So that's definitely going to be a challenge for the country. In terms of fixed line infrastructure, I think it's still private investment. A lot of companies are really expanding into those areas. And to be honest, at the moment, there's still a lot of overlap. So it's all the big cities, tier 1, tier 2 cities where you're seeing deployment into fixed infrastructure. That's really got to change and people start to move out into different areas. So that's definitely an area that requires a lot of attention moving forward. One of the challenges about deploying fixed line infrastructure is permitting. So getting right-of-way permits can be extremely challenging sometimes. If I was to lay a cable from 80 kilometres across Jakarta, I may have to get 20 different approvals to actually lay that fibre infrastructure. So that's definitely a challenge. And you've got obviously the public requirements, you've got private approvals as well. So it can be a real challenge. I think you're seeing a shift now in moving towards shared ducting infrastructure. So looking at shared ducting infrastructure, that removes the challenge in permitting, so it allows faster time to market. It actually also secures the fibre infrastructure as well, so there's less fibre breaks, because really at the moment there is no protection on existing fibre infrastructure, so there's a real demand to have some control over the actual protection of the fibre too. So I think these are definitely the challenges moving forward. I think though, if you're looking at the forecast, I think Indonesia is expected to double its fixed line infrastructure penetration to 20% by 2032. So still needs some work to actually move forward on that. But I think in the area, the main areas and where we're seeing the actual development of the data centres in Jakarta, no, that's fully covered right now.
Right. Yep. You mentioned that there's a huge runway for growth, especially on the fixed penetration side, and definitely this runway needs to be supported by infrastructure on the back end, so data centers and connectivity within the country and through submarine outside of the country. But let's talk about data centers first. So Jeffrey, how is the data center industry contributing towards this path? How are they planning for the future? What are the focus areas that they are going to focus on in the next few years?
Well, I think everybody here that has been in the industry, what we call the internet data center business, I think a lot of it's on the fiber, satellite, bandwidth, and then data center as the infrastructure. I think why we are in this industry is that it's an art. It's a combination of various foundation to build the whole solution for the cloud guys, which you name it, the AWS. And so we had a leadership forum yesterday, so we wanted to restructure the industry a bit so that we are more sexier. So we are the underlying foundation for the cloud guys. All right? We are the one that make them work, so to speak. So there's a lot of formulas and consideration when you come to the data center setup. All right, first is the geopolitics of the investment. All right, where you're going to invest, what kind of funds you are in, all right, what type of funds you are, all right, and where you're going to go. And then, specifically to the Indonesian market, right now, if you look at the influx of the number of players there, of course, BDX, I2 has one of the biggest investment right now there, all right, with the acquisition of the partnership with Indosat. But other than that, like I said, if you look at it, there's a whole range of foreign brands and local brands coming out. So it's really about the data center strategy. So whether are you building hyperscale, you're building edge, what type of market are you trying to address? All right, is it wholesale? Is it local enterprise? There's a lot of formulas in the sense to look at what you want to do for the market. And to address the Indonesian market right now, all right, and to answer, to echo Budi's kind of statement, yes, there's overcrowding right now in the Jakarta area. All right, I think I was in Dubai last week, so people were asking me, so where should I throw my money, all right, in Indonesia? So I told them first, you need to define like what I answered before, so what's your strategy? What are you looking at, all right? And then it's a whole combination of what you want to do in terms of addressing the market. You need to be clear. And next, who are the partners you have to build that solution platform? Because data center infrastructure, yes, it's the space. All right, we are like a house, all right, we rent the space. So there's a lot of components in there that has different solutions that you need to work with partners to do the solutioning, so to speak. So if you ask me, Indonesia is still a very interesting market because it's one of the leading countries in Southeast Asia to drive the digital transformation. All right, next, of course, is Philippines. Next is potentially Thailand and then Vietnam. All right, but who knows whether Thailand will run at the same earlier than faster than Philippines? Nobody knows. Because yes, it boils down to the government initiative. How fast do you want to push? And Indonesia, being the largest population in Southeast Asia and the land mass as well. All right, so there is many potential diversity in terms of the potential investment that you want to look at. So it boils down to you're ready for service. When are you looking at? Is it 2023? Is it 2024? Is it 2025? All right, so part of my job with the group is to map that requirement from the hyperscaler along with a good insight of the local enterprise business, the large one, and then to map it across the 5 years, which region, hopefully down to street level, all right, or down the city, where we should go. All right, so that is really not a single answer, but there are many factors to consider. And I'm sure Maya will have more insight to that as well, later part as well. So my answer to that is not a single point of answer, but many factors to consider. All right, and with satellite coming with the lowest latency, it's a different game. American towers, all right, they acquired CoreSite. They are doing the same thing. They want to provide low latency solution to the data center. That's part of the reason why they are into towers. They are building that. So it's going to change the game again when you roll out in Asia part. All right, so that would be my 2 cents worth of answers.
All right, thank you. Mayank, you would like to add to that and also talk about how cloud adoption is taking a role in the data center industry in Indonesia.
Yeah, sure, thanks. And that was very helpful, Jeffrey. So I think, let me just take the infra part first. And I agree with Babudi and what Mike said about the expanse, the geographical expanse of Indonesia is the challenge that, and just having 3 or 4 core data centers in Jakarta or in and around Jakarta like we have today is not really the way to address the full potential of the Indonesian market. And we sort of realized this quite early, even as we were finalizing our partnership with Indosat. And very shortly, we are going to be increasing our footprint across Indonesia by another 10 to 15 locations. And these, of course, will not be the traditional sort of data centers that you have in and around Jakarta today. These are going to be more edge sites, smaller deployments, and the need for that, to the point about cloudification and other content coming in. So I always draw a parallel between India and Indonesia. So Indonesia is where India was about 3 years ago. Today, for example, some of the biggest hyperscalers are moving some of their heaviest loads inside of the country. And I'm talking about in India. And this has nothing to do with the data privacy laws. So a big e-commerce player is moving their shopping site inside of India. You're going to have tons of other such moves being seen in India over the next 12 to 18 months. In Indonesia, I see that period to be a lot more compressed. And while it took India about 5 years to get to the scale of demand that it is seeing today, my strong belief is that in Indonesia, the time scale is going to be a lot shorter. Cloudification in Indonesia is sort of, it's one of the rare markets where Google is ahead of Amazon. I'm not sure if any of those companies are represented here. So yes, it's going to be a big driver. I do sort of want to call out one challenge that we see in the market today, and that is renewable power. And data centers being sort of the power guzzlers that we are, the nature of the beast, we do need to work very closely with the ecosystem in Indonesia to facilitate ease of green power adoption. So today it's still work in progress, policies are still being debated, and partially, Pabudi, the cooperation agreement that's been signed between the two largest telecom companies, I think we need to work together as an industry, as a forum in Indonesia to sort of impress on the government that there is no way that digital explosion is going to be supported by conventional power. It has to go green, it has to be facilitated, and it has to be done very fast. A long-winded answer to a short question.
And you mentioned an interesting point about expanding outside of the current hub, which is Jakarta. Right. It'll be very interesting to know how did you go about deciding what should be the alternative locations?
Well, it's very simple. It's driven by the customers. See, we are we're not intelligent people. We are the infra guys. We lay the bricks quite well. We connect the wires quite well, right? But and I always draw this analogy of McDonald's and Burger King. So McDonald's does all the hard work of identifying a location. They will go and set up their outlet. Burger King will just quietly go and buy the shop next door. So we're like Burger Kings. We just follow the customer or we follow the biggest player in the market. In Indonesia, to your point, this is more about the customers asking for it. And the interesting trend which I'm seeing in the market, of course, very early shoots, is that as the cable systems increase, we're seeing a demand from the customers to co-locate at the landing station itself. And of course, there are multiple reasons to it, but I think the fact that Indonesia, under Telen's leadership and a lot of other players who are building or investing in cable systems, this trend I think is going to gain a lot of strength. And as people like Mike and Piers and Telecoms and everybody else start realizing the potential of traffic growth even in the hinterland. A lot of these landing stations are not like cities like Jakarta or Surabaya. Some of the other islands have a lot of landing stations, maybe just inter-island connectivity, but there are landing stations. So people, customers are looking at having deployments along the landing stations. So that is an opportunity that we are evaluating very seriously, internally as well as along with the customers, and let's see.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Can I just add to that? Actually, no, going back to what Pat Budi mentioned also, I mean, if you're looking at deploying to the edge, and actually that puts a lot more reliance on delivering the backbone infrastructure to be able to support that. And some of the cities, for example, which you would be surprised is actually carrying so much traffic at the moment, for example, Medan in North Sumatra, huge explosion in traffic. Pat Budi mentioned Makassar, Manado, massive explosion in traffic, but because of the geography of the country, very, very difficult to be able to reach. So that, I think that's going to be really important as well as investing in the backbone infrastructure, not just terrestrial, but also then the submarine infrastructure to be able to then support that to the various locations is going to be really key moving forward.
Correct, correct. I mean, one of the countries from which perhaps Indonesia could learn is their neighbor Philippines, right? Similar geography, but in terms of, let's say, if we talk about fixed broadband infrastructure, they are far ahead of Indonesia, right? So the way they've addressed the challenges could be something that Indonesia could learn from as well. Right. One crucial part of the digital roadmap is also satellite connectivity, which has been mentioned as a solution to connect the unconnected. So, Bala, would you like to help us understand how the satellite industry could tap into that opportunity?
Thanks, Sid. So, Indonesia is not new to dealing with satellites. So here's my first question to you guys. Does anybody remember the day or when Indonesia launched its first communications satellite?
Can the panelists participate?
Yeah, panels allowed. Do you remember? No, Budi? No, you can't ask him.
I know. We are the fourth country that
That's right. Because it was Indonesia who, of the developing nations in the world, it was Indonesia who actually launched its first communications satellite. So no one remembers the year? Do you remember the year? It was 1976. 1976, July. I don't remember the date, but so it was, it was the Palapa 1 satellite, and the Palapa 1 satellite, which is owned by now Indosat. I mean, it would then be called Indosat. So they launched a satellite with the capacity to have 6,000 simultaneous phone calls. It was all about voice communications at the time. And now, the latest satellite that Indonesia, the satellite project that Indonesia is involved in now is called Satria-1. Satria-1 has got the capacity to do 150 gigabits per second, 150,000. So it's crazy, the advance that the country has made in terms of satellites. I mean, they didn't go from Palapa 1 to Satria 1. There has been a number of satellites, and in today's Indonesian telecom infrastructure, there are about 9 satellites that the country uses. 5 of them of their own, 4 different satellites from the outside. So I'm talking about Telecoms and Indosas included, as well as PSN. But you also will kill me if I don't mention him. So Indonesia has been in the satellite industry for a long time. So whereas to answer the question about how the satellite industry can actually play a significant role in Indonesia, I think now is a very exciting time for the satellite industry in Indonesia. Because originally it was all about coverage. It was about voice communications. We need to reach everybody. Then the demand for the types of services changed. So video distribution to voice communications to data communications, and now then came the high throughput satellites, and Indonesia is also in the high throughput satellite space. And we're talking about data centers here. As the data centers roll out, and driven primarily by the government's own goal of growing a mega-sized digital economy, and that goal is driving all of this evolution. Indonesia has one of the world's leading universal service obligations implementer, information and telecommunications access agency called Bhakti. I mean, it's now becoming the model for many developed countries, let alone developing countries, for how to use money that's collected from the likes of Telecoms and Indosat for the benefit of the Indonesian population. And they're doing a lot of that using satellite. Because all of these people are from the city center. I'm from the villages, right? So we're building in from out there. We're in the part where there is no connectivity. There's no connectivity, so people were like, just give me any coverage. I can just, send an email and download, some information from the internet, to now wanting to have the same level of service as people in Metro Jakarta have out in the remote parts of the world. And the government's following the same thing, with the e-government service and your One Data Indonesia project, with the public data centers from Batam to Bekasi, all the way to Labuan Bajo. The government's driving this. So there is a lot that's happening that is making the satellite industry to sit up and pay attention to, because out of this comes a massive opportunity. Because if you just look at, talking about the digital roadmap, there are, some 83,000 villages in Indonesia. About 70,000 or 71,000 of them have got 4G connection right now. It may not be the exact same capacity as you get in Jakarta, but there is connectivity somehow. And the government's committed to connecting the remaining 12,500 within the next 2 to 3 years. And now we're talking about the hardest to get to parts of Indonesia. Very difficult, and you need to connect them. But can you just connect them with any satellite? You can't, because, when you talk about 4G voice, you're talking about lower latency than your regular 3G type. So, you mentioned Starlink, and I have to mention my company, OneWeb. We are actually quite excited about this. When you talk about 150 gigabits per second capacity in large HTS satellites, that's not what the low latency guys bring. We have high bandwidth in each of the satellites, but it's very much a niche still. So it may be a small fraction of what the big satellite operators have, but we have something which is low latency, and that really hits the spot with ever-expanding data center network, data centers going further and further out into the edge. And even when you're in Indonesia, when you talk about the edge, that is not the edge. It is just the end of the city part. And the real edge is where you need to take a satellite user terminal, take it by airplane, then take it by jeep, then take it by boat, then you hand carry it to the final destination where it's connected. That is the edge we're talking about. So from there, you still need to access the data centers, which actually now are providing cloud services, and therefore low latency requirement. And so it's a super exciting time for us. I think, we see this evolution happening, and now in the next 5 to 7 years. In fact, Minister Plate said that your requirement for satellite capacity is about 1 terabit per second by 2030. And Indonesia currently has about 40% of that, 40% of that. There's still a long way to go. So, long answer for a short question, absolutely, satellite is going to play a significant part in Indonesia and bridging the digital divide and making sure we have a significant part to play in the development of the digital economy. Now, what am I going to do with my wine bottles? Actually, it's a wine connection bag with OneWeb paraphernalia, so.
Try another question.
I'll ask another question.
Yeah. We'll give the first right to the audience, and if no one answers, then we move to the panel.
All right. So anyway, just to add, I say, if any guys are interested about, I say, where's the market and how to look at it between the comparison between Indonesia and India, this gentleman sitting here, he's very knowledgeable. He's from Adani Connects. Reach out to him.
So, Bala, next question.
Next question. So, OneWeb, as part of its regional expansion, building the network out, we also have we're building a ground gateway. Unlike some of the, our competitors' gateways, which are tiny, we take up a whole 6 hectares. And we put 18 massive antennas in a place called Serang, And we have a leading VSAT provider who is our distribution partner in Indonesia. Does anyone know their name? Please. You must know Pak Sugeng. Pak Sugeng? Oh, Christ. I have to think of another name. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. At least I can give some gifts to somebody. And the final question is, what time is the drink sponsored by China Mobile International? Or China Telecom today, right? Perfect. Okay, the rest of the gifts are for you. Thank you. So yeah, thanks very much. But I mean, I was just making a point. I mean, you know, I think we're really excited about Indonesia. I think the government's very supportive. The regulations have also evolved. It's not like, you know, we mentioned that before. It's not just about having a goal, but actually putting the money where your mouth is, and at the same time creating an environment from a policy and regulatory point of view that also supports the, you know, successful existence of companies like ours, which is great for Indonesia as well as for us. Thank you.
All right, Pabudi, were you saying something?
Yeah, I think the other thing that really important is, as previously mentioned by Mayank, like what we are doing now with Indosat, how to do more collaboration in terms of the deployment of the infrastructure for this company. I think it's quite critical also for all the stakeholder, the players, how we can plan or work together. I think to support all this initiative. Just give you an example, you know, when we built the second gateway for the eastern part of Indonesia, actually we are also inviting all the local carrier provider also to join us to build that. One of the benefits that we can see is for the eastern part of Indonesia now, if they want to have the access to US content, the latency that we can save is around 50 to 90 milliseconds to US, comparing to the existing road that should go to Jakarta and then Singapore. So it's huge improvement, 24 to 36% improvement in terms of the latency. So I think some of the ISP that working with us also to use this second gateway, they're quite exciting with this development. Hopefully with that, with all collaboration from all stakeholders, we can expedite the deployment support and to provide the equitable infrastructure throughout Indonesia. Of course, there is still a gap, but it should be smaller than what we have today. Yeah, I think I invite any one of you that want to work together. We are quite open to work to everyone. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Just leave a couple of minutes for any questions from the audience.
We were told that there was a cloud who will ask all the questions.
I think you asked the last relevant question, Bala. What time is the... Thank you so much, gentlemen.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming together for the conversation. I know we ran into the drinks and everyone's keen to go and network and enjoy that. So to the foyer on your right, you'll find the China Telecom drinks, which have just started. Thank you very much for coming along today. And I hope you've had some good takeaways. Thanks again to our panelists, and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.